Howdy folks, welcome back to Mingles with Jingles. It is Monday. It is time to pretend to answer your questions while rambling incoherently for half an hour about just absolute bollocks, but you know, that's why you love me. The first thing I wanted to do in this week's Mingles with Jingles is just put the whole Tankfest thing to rest. Now, in case, you've been living under a rock and you don't know what I'm talking about, or you're new to the channel and you don't know what I'm talking about, I went to Tankfest 2013 this year with my trusty camera minion, Eddie. And I went along dressed as because it was Tankfest, so I went as a German tank crewman with the old black German tank crew uniform, the tank crew death's heads on the collar, and so on and so on and so on. And one of the PR guys at Wargaming's display at Tankfest shit himself when he saw what I was wearing and asked me to leave. And then later on I was asked to come back and told that I could only come in if I took the uniform off, and I basically chose to screw it. I can't be bothered with this, I'm out of here. So in effect I got removed from the Wargaming display twice on the day. And a lot of people were up in arms about it. We need to put this into perspective, folks. It's not like Tom Cruise turned up dressed in a Deutsche Afrika Korps uniform advertising the movie Valkyrie and was turfed out by Wargaming. Right? I'm a relative nobody in the grand scheme of things. I'm a minor internet celebrity at best. Also, the whole thing really resulted as a whole bunch of breakdowns in communication. Firstly, on my behalf, yes, I told Wargaming I was going to be there a month in advance. But I told them in the Community Contributors Forum, which is a forum that most of you guys don't have access to. And it turns out, although I didn't know this at the time, that there aren't that many people at Wargaming that have access to this forum. There's a couple of the PR team have access to it, some of the forum moderators. But of the PR team that did have access to that forum, only one of them went to Tankfest, and he didn't read the thread. So, and nobody who did have access to the forum and who read it, and I don't know if anybody actually read it, nobody told any of the guys who were going to Tankfest. So the guys at Tankfest were completely unprepared for the sight of somebody in a black uniform with death's heads on the collar walking in and everybody wanting pictures taken of him. So you can kind of appreciate the spot that the Wargaming PR guys were on at the time. Also, the pictures that I did post were a work in progress. I mean, I told them it was going to be a German Panzerwaffe uniform, but it was a work in progress, and none of the badges were sewn onto the uniform in the picture that I took and posted up. So I just assumed that, being a company responsible for putting out a tank game, that they would actually know what a Panzer crew uniform looked like. But either nobody read the thread, or the people that did read it didn't put two and two together, and nobody that read it told the guys that went to Tankfest. So, once again, and I've spoken to a couple of people at Wargaming since the whole incident, what actually happened was the guy who made the decision to ask me to leave had no idea who I was, didn't actually know what I was wearing, because he was a PR guy. He's not a tank, he's not a history buff. And he just assumed, based on what he's seen in TV and the movies, which is where most people get their history from, he just assumed that I was wearing an SS uniform. And it's a reasonable assumption to make if you're not forewarned about what to expect, because many of you guys have made the mistake of thinking it was an SS uniform, and this is with the benefit of me telling you what it is, and I've had to explain multiple times. So you can't really blame the PR guy who had no information to the contrary and just had to deal with this guy wearing what he thought was an SS uniform with dozens of people wanting their picture taken with him inside Wargaming's display. You don't want that kind of negative publicity. So I can totally understand the reaction of the guy the way he did. And I could have done more. I could have made sure that my message got through before I went. If I'd posted a picture of the finished uniform instead of just saying, this is what it is, it's going to look like this, anybody who read that topic would have seen the small swastikas and said, whoa, hold on, we're going to have a problem with that. But I didn't. That didn't happen. If I'd been a more experienced reenactor, and this is what I'll be doing in future, anytime I wear that uniform at a reenactment event where there are likely to be sensitive areas, what proper reenactors do is they just take a couple of small rolls of black masking tape along, little patches of black masking tape, and they cover up the swastikas with those. But it's the first time I've ever reenacted, if you like, and I didn't have that kind of experience. So there was a lot of miscommunication going on from all sides, and you can't really hold wargaming responsible. And despite that, I had a conversation with, I think he was Wargaming's Director of Public Relations for Paris. Very nice bloke, his name's Mo, and he offered his personal apologies, which completely wasn't necessary, but it was nice that he did, and gave me a... he bought me off. I suppose is one way of looking at it, but no. As a gesture, he compensated me with a bonus code that gave me some gold, and the Tier 3 premium German light tank, the Panzer 735F, which I already had. But if you already have a gold tank, when it gets gifted to you, you get the gold value as well. So I ended up very nice gesture. It was very apologetic. Really, really nice bloke, and just emphasise the fact that if you're going to do something like this, you need to communicate beforehand. Otherwise, this sort of thing happens. So thanks very much to Wargaming for going to the effort to make things right. And they didn't need to, but it was just a really, really nice gesture on behalf of the staff at Wargaming. And hopefully, next time something like this happens, I'll either not wear such a controversial uniform, or we'll just take steps to cover up the offending articles if there are going to be any pictures taken. Remember that Wargaming did a community event at the Tank Museum in Finland a few months ago. And of course, the Finnish tanks also used the swastika. They spent days having to Photoshop all of those swastikas out. Every picture they took at the event, they didn't realise until they got all the pictures back to Paris and started preparing the web page showing the event in Finland, and then they realised, oh crap, there's a swastika on every one of these tanks. Even though it's not a Nazi swastika, the swastika's been used in a lot of cultures. I think the earliest recorded use, ancient Indians used it. But yeah, the Finnish vehicles also had swastikas on them. They weren't Nazi swastikas. The Finns weren't Nazis, but it doesn't matter. When you're in the business of PR, you just can't use that symbol. So they had to spend days and days and days photoshopping non-Nazi swastikas off all of the Finnish tanks and the pictures at the Finnish Tank Museum for the community event that they had there, before they could even use the photos. So, yeah, lesson learned. Hopefully everybody learned, to basically just do better next time. So there you go, Tankfest, laid to rest. Incidentally, now that Tankfest is done and dusted, the next major event I'm going to be going to is the War and Peace Show at the end of this month. For those of you who don't know what the War and Peace Show is, it's a big old reenactment event. So there will be military vehicles there. Lots of collectors display their stuff. There's all sorts of reenactment groups. So hopefully we're going to get some good stuff from that as well, and hopefully you'll also enjoy that video. Next, I just wanted to make a small mention of the fact that we're up to around about 89,000 subscribers. We're fast approaching 100,000 subscribers on this channel. I never, ever, ever thought there was going to be that many of you who were so easily amused as to watch my videos every day. I will definitely be doing something special for 100,000 subscribers. I'm probably going to be giving away some Tier 8 premium tanks. There's going to be a competition. I'm going to be giving away all sorts of good stuff. So when we reach 100,000 subscribers, I already have some plans, but it's too early to announce them yet. We get there, I'll make the announcement, and we'll have some fun times to celebrate reaching 100,000 subscribers with Bohemian Eagle, the mighty Jingles. Hooray! The first actual question of the day today comes from Gendo1, and he wants to know, as an older gamer himself, do people in my own personal circle judge me for being, the kind of old man who plays video games all day? It's a good question. I suppose you'd have to go back to when I first started putting videos up on YouTube. I just left the Royal Navy. I'd done 22 years service and gotten what they call an immediate pension. And that basically means you don't have to wait until you reach official state retirement age. And the day you leave the Navy, after completing your full open engagement, they immediately start paying you a pension. And it was just barely enough to live on. So I wasn't in any great rush to go out and, get a proper job. I had a lot of money saved up. I could spend 6 months just having fun before I really needed to go out and find myself a part-time job just to supplement my pension. And I started playing World of Tanks and putting videos up. And I definitely at first, I got the impression that nobody would actually come right out and say it. But you do get the impression that people are thinking, get a job, you lazy bum. Which, is fair enough. But I was certainly under no financial pressure at first, to do that. I was, I'd worked hard for 22 years. I wanted to chill out and relax a little bit before I, went back to work. And when YouTube really started kicking off, I play games for a living. Nobody judges me for it. They're all jealous. It's an enviable position to be in. It can be. I'm not going to say it can be hard. I mean, God, it's not hard work. Sitting around playing War Thunder and World of Tanks isn't hard. But sometimes you don't feel like playing a particular game. You get tired of it. You fancy a break, and it can be difficult mustering the enthusiasm to play well and get the kind of videos that are worth putting up. But that's the beauty of World of Tanks' replay system. If I am having a shit game streak where I just can't get a team that can tell the difference between its arse and its elbow, stop playing. I have enough good games that I can do videos of and put up on YouTube that I can just, I could get away with not playing World of Tanks again for the next 3 months and still put a World of Tanks video up every day that would be worth watching. The opinion's subjective, obviously. What I think is worth watching and what you think are worth watching are two completely different things, but in theory I could put the mouse and keyboard aside and just watch TV for the next 3 months and still put a World of Tanks video up every day. So it's great. It's absolutely fantastic. Do people judge me for it? No. My mother used to say, you'll never get a job playing computer games all day. Do your homework. And it was my mother's birthday recently, and I was on the phone to her, and we were laughing about this very thing, actually. She can't believe my luck either. I actually have a job playing computer games all day. Nobody judges me for it. Everybody's jealous, Next question comes from Bobby Lighters, and he wants to know, Jingles, have you ever played sports, and which sports do you prefer nowadays? I think it's probably safe to say that I've never really been much of a sportsman. I'm a nerd. Right, when we were playing sports at school, I was the last guy picked. They'd pick the girls before they'd pick me to play football, No, I've never really been into sports. And this kind of question and questions associated with it keep popping up every now and then. People find out that I originally come from Newcastle in England, and they want to know, do you support Newcastle United, the football team? And I like to see them do well, but I wouldn't go so far as to say I support them, and I certainly never watch sports. Although I did used to play certain sports. I mean, I do airsoft, but that's not really a mainstream sport. The only real sports I have ever done were fencing and archery. Yeah, that's right. Sports that involve the use of weapons. Big surprise there. And shooting as well, obviously. The shooting I competed at the Portsmouth Area Command Skill at Arms. Shooting in the military is... The Navy doesn't really take it as seriously as the Army or even the Air Force. I was a good shot. I wasn't a sniper or anything, but I was I was a qualified marksman. And I loved shooting. And on those very, very rare occasions where I was on a ship that was in Portsmouth whenever a Skill at Arms meet was being held, and I managed to persuade the gunners to put a team together. It was great, but it didn't happen very often. And the Navy certainly never would, if you were deployed, getting off the ship to go to a sports meeting, you basically had to be playing Navy rugby. And even then, your chances of getting off the ship and flying back to the UK to play the match were very, very limited. The Navy really didn't take sport as seriously as certainly not the Army. I mean, you can join the Army. If you ever look at the Army rugby team, for example, the British Army rugby team basically consists of most of Fiji's national team. They're quite brazen about it. They would literally go to all these Commonwealth countries and recruit the best sportsmen into the Army, and then they'd technically be soldiers, but all they would ever do is train for whatever the sport it was they were recruited for. The Air Force as well. Rory Underwood, for example, famous British rugby player, was a sergeant in the Royal Air Force. He never did his job in the Air Force, he just trained to play rugby all the time. And that would never happen in the Navy. Although I did have... I did manage to just the once get to Portsmouth Command Skillet Arms meet, as I mentioned, and a couple of funny things happened while I was there. I'll tell you one of them. 9mm pistol, Browning high power. I was taking part in the pistol shoot contest, and it was basically you had one magazine and a bunch of targets 20 metres away. And when you're at a Skillet Arms meet, if you have any stoppages, if the weapon jams whatsoever, it's up to you to fix it, and you don't get any special time. They don't restart it if your weapon jams or anything. You have to clear the jam, get the weapon back into working order, and carry on with the shoot, and make up for the lost time yourself. Now, the thing you have to bear in mind about personal weapons in the Navy is they're usually the kind of junk that the Army doesn't want anymore. Yeah, the Navy doesn't spend a lot of money on personal weapons. So they're usually very old, very worn out pistols, rifles, all that sort of thing. And the pistols that we had, they must have been 50 years old. And they were worn to hell. So I'm standing there on the firing range, and the practice shoot starts. And I've got this 9mm Browning high power pistol. And I pulled the trigger, and it jammed. So I cleared the jam, reset the weapon, fired, and it jammed again. And it was basically the extractor wasn't working, and the spent cartridges were getting jammed in the ejection port. So I cleared the stoppage, fired again, and a couple of the instructors are standing there laughing their asses off at me at this point. They go, "Oh, look at this sucker, oh." And I was cursing the gunners and the armourers at this stage. I cleared the jam again, reset the weapon, fired again, and it jammed again. Every shot I fired, this thing jammed. And this time the shell had wedged itself right in the ejection port, and I couldn't get it out. So I popped the magazine out, pulled the slide right back, got my finger down inside it, and wedged the thing right out, hooked it out, magazine back in, slide release forward, and then the bottom plate fell out of the magazine, and then the spring fell out, and then all the bullets fell out. and I just gave up at that point. I was like, you've got to be joking. Everybody was rolling around laughing. Well, what can you do? It wasn't my fault. It wasn't my weapon. They call them personal weapons, but you don't have a personal weapon in the Navy. You have weapons in the armoury that you sign out. So it's not my fault, but it was funny as hell. Now, fencing, I was quite heavily into fencing at one stage. I got into that down the Falkland Islands the first time I was down there. The Falklands, the first time I was there was in the mid-90s, and there was nothing there on the base. It was literally just, people would go down the Falklands and come back alcoholics, because there was nothing else to do but drink. It's different now, of course. They've got all sorts of facilities there for the troops, but the first time I went down there was nothing, and you either got into sport and came back super fit, or you came back an alcoholic. And I've never really been much of a drinker, so I started looking around for sports that I could do, because it would just gone mad with boredom otherwise. Now, I was quite lucky in that there's always a Royal Engineer company of sappers down in the Falklands, and the Royal Engineers are heavily into fencing. It's a very, very big thing with the Royal Engineers. And there was a Royal Engineer corporal who was taking fencing classes. He's a fantastic bloke. I cannot remember his name. I'm really sorry. I remember him being a huge man. He was built like an England rugby player. He was massive, incredibly fast on his feet for such a big bloke. And he took it upon himself to train people up to do fencing. And I thought, I'll have some of that. And I went along. And I was one of the only enlisted men who turned up. It was mostly an officer thing, officers and Royal Engineers. And I was certainly the only Navy guy there. There's not that many Navy personnel down the Falklands at all. There's like a garrison of 2,000 and only 50 of them are Navy. So yeah, Navy doing fencing. And I turned out to be pretty good at it. Not in every discipline. I was lousy with the sabre. I just wasn't very good at that. The sabre's very, very aggressive, and you need a lot of strength for the sabre. But the weapons that required a bit of finesse, the foil I was quite good at, and the épée I was very good at. But the thing is, and again, quite a funny story about this, there was a Royal Air Force corporal who was very, very good using the épée, and they were having a fencing tournament down in the Falklands. Again, this Army engineer corporal had sorted out a tournament. And the commander of British Forces Falkland Islands, who was I think he was a Major General at the time, had come down to watch the fencing tournament. And this was I'd been training for about 2 months, and this tournament kicked off. And this RAF corporal, he was good, but he was too good to come and train with us noobs. And he was the engineer corporal hated him. The Air Force corporal was a real arrogant snob. You know, he wasn't a very nice person at all. And so while I say I was pretty good with the épée, and I was, but this engineer corporal realised that I was probably his best épée student, and he trained me in particular not to be good with the épée, although, you know, that was a side effect of how he trained me. He trained me to beat this Air Force corporal specifically, because he knew how this guy fought, and he just wanted this guy to lose. You know, we were vindictive like that. So he trained me specifically to beat this guy, and I can remember the day of the fencing tournament, with Commander British Forces Falkland Islands watching. I squared up against this Air Force corporal for the final of the épée section of the tournament. And the old engineer corporal would stand behind me, and it was literally, it's a best of three. The first person to score 3 hits wins. So we're there for the final. He stands behind me and he says, "Right, remember the way this guy plays. Right, he likes to start off very aggressive, so hold back at the start, just play defensive, weather the storm, and then look for your opening and counter-attack." And I went, "Yeah, okay, got it." That's exactly what happened. Played defensively, blocked, parried, riposte, scored the first point. So this Air Force corporal was like, "Oh, I'm not having this." He went back to the start line. He said, engineer corporal pops up behind me again. He says, "Okay, this time, do exactly the opposite, right? Be aggressive, go right in, right? He's going to be wary of you now. Don't give him a chance to get you, to size you up. Because if you do, he will beat you." Right, okay, no problem. So again, match started, and I just went straight in. Beat his defence back, scored a point. So it's 2-0 now, all to play for, match point. And this time, Corporal stepped up behind me, he just said one word, he said, "Fleisch." Now, I'm not entirely certain where the word comes from. It's either French or German, and it just literally means flail. And what a fleisch attack is, where you literally just launch yourself at the opponent, right? It's 100% attack. If you miss, you're screwed, because you're totally off balance, you've got no defence up, and they'll whack you. But if you're fast and aggressive enough and you take them by surprise, it just powers through any defence they have. You can't defend against a fleisch, you have to avoid a fleisch, you have to dodge it, sidestep it. So that's the theory anyway, so that's exactly what I did. And I quite literally, I went airborne. I launched myself off the ground with my arm extended and the épée just pointing straight for his heart, powered right through his defence, hit him, and then landed in a snotty heap on the ground, because you literally just, you fly at them. And he threw his toys out of the pram, he ripped his mask off in front of the Major General, Commander British Forces Falkland Islands. He was such a bad loser. Ripped his mask off, threw it on the ground, threw his sword away, and just stormed off. And I turned around, and this engineer corporal has a big smile on his face. He was like, "Yes, that's my boy." Next question comes from What's That 35, and he wants to know, "Jingles, what are your impressions of the other branches of the British Armed Forces, the Army and the Royal Air Force?" It's a good question, actually. I have served in a lot of joint service locations. The Falkland Islands, obviously. Vast majority of people there Well, it's about half Air Force and Army. Obviously, there's a lot of soldiers there, and there's a lot of Air Force there because it's Royal Air Force Mount Pleasant is the name of the base. Not many Navy, as I already mentioned. There's a small engineer unit to provide assistance with ships in Mayor Harbour undergoing repairs and servicing. And there's a small number of caterers and one writer, and that was me. I've worked at Fort Blockhouse, which is the Joint Service Medical Services training facility. There's also Royal Hospital Haslar, which is there. All the Army, Navy and Air Force medics and nurses and doctors and so on and so on. So yeah, I have quite a bit of experience of working with the other armed forces. But the three services are completely different in their outlook and the way they do things. I mean, just as an example, speaking of working at Fort Blockhouse and the medical services, if you are sick, just a quick example of the vast differences between the three. Right, if you're a soldier, right, and you are ill, first of all, you still have to turn up for work, and then you have to ask your sergeant or your corporal for permission to go to the sick bay. Right, and if they don't give you permission to go to the sick bay, then you carry on working while you're sick. Okay. And only if you're given permission to the sick bay are you allowed to go and report sick, and then have a doctor or a medic, pronounce you sick, and then send you back to your sergeant or corporal for them to decide what to do with you. Right? So that's one end of the extreme. In the Navy, it's a case of if you're ill, you still have to turn up, but you just report straight to sick bay, and then sick bay will stand you off or not. They'll tell you, okay, go to bed, go home, whatever, and they, provide you with a sick chit. But you then have to inform, your boss that you're sick, basically, and there's your sick note, and then off you go. In the Air Force, you just phone in and say, I'm ill, I'm not coming in today. Sick bay not required. The Air Force, the Army and the Navy have their differences, right? But we are united in a deep and abiding contempt for the Royal Air Force. Oh, right, that's not strictly true, but the Army and the Navy do like to take the piss out of the Air Force. I mean, with the Navy being the senior service, and the Army, obviously as a whole, the Army consists of lots and lots of different regiments and corps that have histories going back almost as long as the Navy does. And in some cases, certain Army regiments can trace their history back as far or further than the Royal Navy. But the Air Force is the new kid on the block, so, the two big boys like to gang up on the new kid, but it's just joking around. There's nothing serious about it. I remember the last time I was down the Falklands, you have to remember, right, the Royal Navy can trace its roots back to King Alfred the Great. It's 1,000 years old, and when we were down the Falklands the last time I was there, the Air Force celebrated its 90th anniversary. So yeah. We were like, oh, bless. You're that old, are you? Oh, well done. Congratulations. So, yeah, there's a lot of banter that goes on between the three different services, but nobody means anything by it unless they're an idiot. It's just fun. Actually, speaking of fun, there's a joke. There's a couple of jokes. The first one, and again, just to illustrate the difference between the three services, if you were to take a sailor, a soldier, and an airman, and point to a house and tell all three of them to go and secure that house, the sailor would go into the house and he'd make sure all the electrical equipment was turned off. He'd shut the doors and the windows, and he'd make sure he locked the door on the way out. And then, as he left, he would empty the bins. The soldier would kick the door in, roll a grenade down the hallway, and spray each room with bullets before leaving the place a smoking wreck and saying, "Building secured, sir." The airman would take a mortgage out on the place. And that perfectly just illustrates the differences between the three services. You could say the same thing to three different servicemen of each service, and they would all interpret it completely the different way. There's another joke, actually. There's a... how can I put this? First of all, you need to know what a buffer is. The buffer is the nickname in the Navy for the chief boatswain's mate, and he's the chief sailor, if you like, the seaman, the guy who does all the seamanship stuff. So you've got the buffer. You've got an Army regimental sergeant major, and you've got an Air Force station warrant officer, and they're all standing around arguing over who's the hardest. Jack the sailor, Percy the pongo, or Nigel the airman. And they decide to settle the argument. So the army, the Royal Air Force Station Warrant Officer says, "Airman, come over here." And this airman comes running over and, "Attention." "Yes, sir." He says, "Right. What I want you to do is get your full combat kit on, right? So your pack, your rifle, and you see that hill over there?" He says, "Yep." He says, "I want you to run over that hill and run back. You've got 1 minute. Off you go." So the airman throws all his gear on, grabs his rifle, and doubles away, gets up the top of the hill, comes all the way back down. "Reporting as ordered, sir." 58 seconds. Station Warrant Officer turns around to the other two and he says, "Now that's hard." Well, the regimental sergeant major's having none of this, so he says, "Soldier!" Squaddy comes running over. "Sir, yes, sir." "Right, full battle kit, £50 pack. You see that hill over there?" "Yes, sir." "Not that one. See the one after it?" "Yes, sir." "I want you to run over that hill, double all the way back. You got 1 minute. Off you go." "Sir, yes, sir." So he throws all his kit on and he storms off across the field, over the first hill, over the second hill, all the way back. 59 seconds. "Reporting as ordered, sir." "Lovely boy. Off you go." The RSM turns around at the other two and says, "Now that's hard." So the buffer just thinks, "Shit." And he shouts, "Jack, in a minute, buffer." "Not in a minute, now. Put that fag out and come over here." So Jack goes wandering over to the buffer. What's the matter, buffer?" He says, "Right, what I want you to do is I want you to get into full action working dress, right? Life jacket, anti-flash coveralls. Then I want you to get a Fear Naught firefighting suit on top of that. Breathing apparatus, firefighting mask and hood. Then I need you to grab that general purpose machine gun, right? And you see that hill over there?" "Yes, buffer." "Well, not that one. See the one after that?" "Yes, buffer." "Not that one. You see the one after that?" "Yes, buffer." "I want you to run to that hill and then come back with all that gear on. You've got 1 minute. Off you go." And Jack says, "Fuck off, buffer." The buffer turns around at the other two and says, "Now that is hard." Yeah, I've had a lot of fun over the years working with the other services, but usually because, as I said, anytime you're in a joint service environment as a sailor, you tend to be outnumbered, vastly outnumbered by the Army and the Air Force. And there's so much you can get away with because they just assume, "Oh, your haircut's a bit, your hair's a bit long, Sonny, isn't it time you got a haircut?" "Oh, no, Sergeant, we're allowed to have a hair this long in the Navy." "Oh, okay, right." They just, you can get away with so much stuff. And they keep saluting you as well, which was really, really weird. And this, again, my first time down the Falkland Islands. Because basically, if you're in the Army, the higher up your rank goes, the more important you are. So 1 stripe for a Lance Corporal, 2 stripes, and we're getting a bit further up the arm, now you're a Corporal, 3 stripes, Sergeant, 3 stripes and a crown, Staff Sergeant, or, if you're in the Royal Marines, Colour Sergeant. And anything on the shoulder is an officer, so you salute that. And of course, Navy, we all wear our ranks on our epaulets on our shoulders. So I was constantly getting saluted, and it was really, really confusing at first. I'm like, why are they all saluting me? They think you're an officer, just return the salute. But shouldn't I tell them? No, trust me, it'll save time. Just return the salute and keep walking. Oh, okay. And it was absolutely right. Because if you stopped to explain to somebody that, actually, Sergeant, you outranked me, so you shouldn't be saluting me, they just got angry about it. So, and yeah, you're walking along and all these squaddies are saluting you, and you just return the salute. "Yes, thank you very much, carry on please," and just keep walking. It was just, and it wasn't just the Army as well. I mean, I've worked at Supreme Headquarters Allied Powers Europe in Belgium, and everybody salutes you there. They see a bit of gold on your shoulder and they just think, "Officer," bang. So, Americans, Spaniards, Italians, French, Germans, everybody saluted me. I was getting saluted by other officers. So I love working in joint service establishments. It's great. There's so much you can get away with because people just assume that, rules must be different in the Navy, and there's nobody they can check with because you're the only Navy there. Take advantage of it. It's great stuff. Anyway, folks, it's been over half an hour, and I need to get back on the test server and play some E25 and MT25 tanks and stuff and report back on what they're like for you. So, as always, if you have any questions that you want me to pretend to answer in the next week's Mingles with Jingles, leave them in the comments to this video. The chances of me actually getting to answer one of your questions are pretty slim. There's thousands of comments, and I only really get time to answer half a dozen of the questions. But you know, as always, I will try to give the most entertaining answers to the questions that I think I can give the most entertaining answers to. And have yourselves a little chat in the comments as well. Questions that I think I could give a good answer to, but probably ain't going to make it into Mingles with Jingles, I'll answer in the comments, so we can get a little conversation going on there too. As always, folks, I certainly hope you've enjoyed and been entertained by your weekly dose of Mingles with Jingles. Take care on that battlefield. Watch your six, and I'll catch you next time.